Hello and a very warm welcome to Accenture Presents Pride Means More in association with Economic Times Business Verticals. I'm your host, Divina Lasson. Now, we're here today to engage on a very exciting, important topic, Pride Means More. In today's workplace, ensuring that diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts include individuals who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, LGBTIQ+, is essential for business success.
Group and the founder of Keshav Suri Foundation. And now we're, I think, taking that motto and wanting to say, to change it up a little bit and say we want to build an inclusive world.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Soundarya Rajesh. I am the founder and president of the Avatar Group. We are a 22-year-old organization that has been at the forefront of diversity, equity, and inclusion in India. And we believe that it is through organizations, such as the ones that are here on this session here today, that true change in the workplace can happen. The workplace is the microcosm of the society. And it's when the best organizations in the country begin seeing diversity, equity, and inclusion as very, very elemental to their functioning, that we can see that change happen. Avatar helps organizations progress towards continued inclusivity. We also help them maximize the effectiveness of their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And we also believe that taking data-driven decisions around diversity, equity, and inclusion is probably the way in which organizations can really see business success. So thank you so much for having me on this session.
Once again, very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for your introductions and really helping us to set the context. Dr. Soundarya, let's start with you. So in your vast experience working in DEI and really being at the forefront of helping people understand the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, what would you say? Can you help us set the context to understand what are some of the major barriers that you've seen in your experience, both in the workplace, but also within our society, that impact DEI being widespreadly accepted?
I think it begins with communication. I think communication is where we all need to begin as a starting point to creating truly inclusive organizations, inclusive teams, and a place that is respectful and completely inclusive of every kind of individual. I'm sure we all would have recently read about Yamini Rangan from India, who is the CEO of HubSpot. And she is someone that kind of made her way from a small town in India to becoming, the CEO of a tech giant in the US. What clearly makes, someone like her be part of a really large organization and right at the top? I believe it is in inclusion. It is in fostering that sense of inclusion through very, very clear communication, which is basically nothing but, the art of saying that, hey, my organization is accessible and respectful to all. And we embrace the fact that everyone is our audience and we are here for everybody. Whenever we use inclusive communication, it's extremely clear. For instance, you asked all of us to introduce ourselves around the table just now. And that is the beginning of inclusion. Now, we all know each other and we are all now part of a discussion that's going to happen. I think simple things like using very clear language, steering clear of jargon, both in internal and external ways of communicating. Those are the simple starting points of how inclusion can actually be. Using, visual communication, learning the nuances of respectful, non-discriminatory language, using different, models of different body types in advertising campaigns, creating unbiased job advertisements. These are some ways in which I think, we can send out that message very strongly as an organization that we welcome everyone.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Zahara, let's get you in on this, as Dr. Saundarya has so beautifully encapsulated the importance of communication. So I'd love to know from you, after all, the cornerstone of any organization is its people. So how are you taking steps to ensure inclusion? How are you taking steps to ensure effective communication to really make sure that your workplace and all the people involved can thrive regardless of their sexual orientation, gender, or expression?
Thank you for that question. I'll just talk two things right before just on the previous question. And Doctor said so amazingly, right? Communication matters. And I will just add another piece to that communication, right? Inclusive communication matters. And so, I'm going to go back and introduce myself. I use pronouns she and her, and I kept that off until we come to a conversation, because how does it matter if I just pronounce my pronouns, right? By pronouncing my pronouns, I am making space for people to feel comfortable by sharing pronouns if they don't align to the heteronormal societal bound that we are made in, right? So I just wanted to talk that about in terms of the previous question. In terms of what we're doing at Accenture, right, to go back to your question, current question at hand, I think we've realized the fact that culture is really an element, not of the walls that build the buildings of Accenture, but really the people. And if culture is about the people, what will allow our people to thrive is inclusivity, when they can drop the need to be at war with themselves, when they can drop the need to self-preserve, is when they will thrive. And so I'm just going to talk about three things, right? And start from the top, setting bold goals. I think it's really important for organizations to get bold, to get more vocal about what their IND goals are, to provide updates just like you would to do to your financial goals, right? Bottoms up, focus on how are you bringing sensitization to reality. How do your leaders show up? How is that sensitization empowering people to be more safe? And I think the cushion in the middle is, is there place to voice concerns? Is there place where, the policy makers are listening to what people require? I think if you were to kind of think about that entire 3-level cushion, that's when cultural changes will start happening. And that's where we are going. I'm very proud of where we are, honestly, but we still have a long, long road ahead, and really humbling and, going on that journey.
Thank you. And Sahara, one of the aspects that arguably that can contribute to this sense, this culture of inclusiveness, is also equality when it comes to employee benefits within organizations. Can you share a little bit about this and how you've seen this develop, and maybe some of the steps that you're taking at Accenture as well to ensure equality when it comes to benefits, as you very beautifully put, to make sure people are no longer in a sort of struggle and survival mode, just to establish their presence and their significance in the organization?
And I know you asked me very directly about policies, right? But I think before I get into policies, I just want to talk about general performance cycles, right? I think it's really important prior to all performance cycles to go back and amp up your conversations around biases. Awareness of biases, and how do you educate on biases. And I think that's something that we do, right? Before every performance cycle, we will go back and make people realize the fact that as human beings, judgment, perception is bound to happen at a snap of or a blink of an eye, which means, pause, reflect, and understand, am I circumventing to some biases? So I think that's extremely important to help us move forward in equity, right? Back in 2016, Accenture was among one of the first firms to actually have medical cover for gender reassignment surgery. We extended that to partners of our LGBTQI plus people. So gender reassignment was one big element which we were able to bring to our people. We do have a parents-in-law coverage facility that's available to our employees, we were able to bring the partners of the community members to be covered through that policy as well, right? And so those were some of the things that we've kind of been very conscious of doing. Gender dysphoria, specifically for our transgender people, is a massive implication, right? The way you show up, the way you represent yourself, and you can't imagine the amount of mental well-being issues that has, right? So hormonal replacement therapy is something that we introduced as well, and something that I will share very humbly, right? We have ERGs, which is employee resource groups. We have a Pride ERG, and our ERG spoke to us and said, it's not just about hormones, it's also about how I look. And so facial reconstruction surgery for our transgender people, we were able to bring that on. We did all of the things in terms of getting a workplace ready and the gender neutral washrooms, but we had to go beyond. And so voluntary eggs and sperm freezing processes, being able to nominate your partners as your beneficiaries, being able to, adopt the name that is most suitable to you without requiring documentation. A lot of those policies allow for our people to start feeling comfortable in their skin. And then, of course, we supplement it with learning opportunities to actually allow them to thrive.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing this. Rajesh, let's bring you in on this. We're talking a lot about both policies within organizations as well as effective communication that can really be one of the keys of making a difference. How would you say we can normalize conversation on some of the really sort of deep-rooted negative beliefs that do exist in society and in the workplace about the LGBTQ IQ+ community?
Yeah, so I agree with what Dr. Aishwarya was saying. Communication is the key. We need to make sure now that how do we make it easier, impactful, and faster, and more broad-based. So let me use an example from my previous employer. With 80,000 people, you could have done so much of communication and over so much of time. We decided to come with a product for customers. So same-sex couple saving account. And the moment that product went to the branches and the moment that account became a target for the salespeople, everybody understood what it means. We did not have to put pamphlets and communication around that, how it is right or wrong or fair or unfair. So it was led by something which is core to a business. That is performance. So that's one thing which I think we cannot stand out and have our conversations or our communications, which is not part of our daily routine. It has to gel in with our day-to-day activities. And that's real inclusion, as both of you have said. Sometimes we must accept that there are biases. And those biases will lead to some kind of conflict, said or unsaid. So if in early times there are conflicts, there are challenges right at the top. And we keep on taking example of when I look at the list of ministers in Government of India, so Shrimati versus Shri, that whole concept of how do we change that? So I don't think we should start fighting something which is very difficult. Make small wins, take small targets, make that part of your day-to-day life and your day-to-day job. And then if it is led by the top, if this is the matter of conversation by CEOs and the board members, it becomes so much more easy.
Yes, absolutely. Keshav, that's a very interesting point that Rajesh brings up. How would you say within an organizational construct, the leaders can really take the reins in championing, accepting, and creating this entire environment of inclusiveness?
Thank you for that. I actually forgot to add one point in my introduction. I'm also the co-chair of the first ever D&I, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Task Force that FICCI came up with. It was me and Radhika Piramal. This was the first time in 92 years of FICCI's existence. I'm sure everybody knows the industry body FICCI, that they had two openly queer co-chairs. And then I don't know if it's a good fact to give or not, But it's just something that we at least were proud of, that at least we started a conversation at FICCI.
Yes, congratulations on that.
Thank you. As everybody knows, Radhika is director at VIP Industries, and she's also sort of leading the front when it comes to queer inclusions and queer leaders out there. In FICCI, in the task force, we had 3 subgroups. And again, for the first time ever, they had a subgroup on empowering people from the LGBTQIA+ community. And for that subgroup, we had Zainab Patel, again, the first ever transgender person that FICCI had on their subgroup. I'm hoping that we stop with this first ever gay person, first ever queer person. I'm hoping that that sort of ends soon. So if I were to give sort of examples in my own organization, yes, change, a lot of the change that came into place was after I came out. And after I told my board of directors and as well as my team that, hey, yes, I'm gay, now let's move on. That was one of the many battles that I was fighting also, considering that I'm a complete Nepo baby. And I'm sure my team was like, what the hell? Not only do we have to deal with him, with his nepotistic behavior, but also his sexuality. It's a joke. I have to say that my team has been really fabulous, and I would not have been able to do any of the things that I do without my team. So whilst I agree with you that it's important to have leaders from the queer spectrum, and that way in the intersectionalities of the queer spectrum, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, intersex, but companies should also understand that team members, they sort of form a part of your family. If I did not have a telephone operator called Mahi, who didn't transition in Kirisu, a very, what is considered an overtly privileged space, a nightclub, which is supposed to be sort of discriminatory, completely turned the game around and became the most inclusive place. If Mahi had not transitioned, and if Mahi had not said, hey, I need this in my Mediclaim insurance, I need this in terms of offs, I need this in terms of people understanding the trans community and then the various intersectionalities in the trans community. So a hijra, a non-binary person, a kinner, all of those terminologies, if I need all of these things, if she wouldn't have, I would have not been able to be at the forefront of trans inclusion at the workspace. I'm very proud to say that I think the Lalisuri Hospitality Group is one of the most trans-inclusive hospitality groups, not just in India, but all over the world. And it's a small little hotel chain, right? Barely 12 hotels. However, people from all over the world recognize it, not just for the inclusion that we do for the trans community. And Mahi is one example. I have many Mahis now across all sort of sections in my decision-making in the company. And now I'm really working towards having a board of director who's a trans person. With Mahi, it was also through the various conversations we had with Mahi that we also did all the work that we did in terms of LGBTQI inclusion. That also came from my selfish need. I'm a gay man, and I needed to do something for my own community within my own organization first, and then take that and be a petitioner at the Supreme Court for the decriminalization of 377. But first, I needed my own team to back me up on it. And it wouldn't have been possible without all the support that I had, not just from my team members, but also the supply chain management that we have. So we went to our insurance company and said very simply, please cover same-sex couples as you do. And when they first resisted, I used a little bit of my soft power, as you want to call it. And I would not recommend everybody do this, but I turned around and said, okay, we'll go somewhere else. You're selling me a service. If we're not going to do this, we'll go to someone else. And that's when they were like, no, hey, we'll do it. This goes to show that companies were ready. This is before decriminalization of 377. Here, I would just request, and I'm going to wrap it up because I keep rambling. I'm going to just request companies to follow exactly what Zahara just said, to follow Also, the India Workplace Equality Index that we partnered with RAM, Pride Circle, and Stonewall UK. If you want steps on how to truly build an inclusive company, but I would take it a step further. I request companies to go beyond just allyship. We need allies, no doubt about it, but we need accomplices as well. Don't take it as a way that we're going to do this because we will enter a chart and be the top most recognized companies in the world because we're inclusive. No, have D&I as a part of your DNA. But when the going gets tough, and we're seeing examples of this in the United States right now with companies like Target and all, don't drop the brand, have a backbone. If you believe in it, stick it through. Irrespective of what happens, whether it's hurting your profit or not, if it is something that you believe in it, trust me, customers will see through it. Customers will back you up if you want to make sure, because they'll be like, okay, we know where our money is going. We're going to back this company up. It may hurt right now, but look at it in the future.
Thank you for all that insight, Keshav. Really, lots of food for thought. Ruku, let's bring you in on this. Keshav brought up a really interesting point of perhaps the buck doesn't stop with allyship, right? And you need accomplices as well in order to really have an effective strategy within organizations for DEI. What's your stance on this? How can what's the role, first of all, that allies can really play in supporting the community, and how do you go beyond that?
I mean, like Keshav said, right, we need allyship and we need accomplices. I would say that allyship has the potential to go a super long way in promoting and fostering that culture, right? It has to be culture, inclusion, it has to be a part of your DNA. There is no replica for that. When everyone walks the talk and respects the culture, I think the output is visible in everyday work life, and I've seen that, right? So, in my previous organizations, I was an ally. But now I'm an ally plus, I'm an individual who identifies as a part of the spectrum and is openly able to talk about it. How did that happen? Because I had allies. Had I not had allies, I wouldn't have been where I am today. And I felt very safe in coming out at Walmart because I felt that sense of belongingness. I saw senior leaders really kind of rallying the cause, right? And it's not just about wearing pride lanyards. They were talking about inclusion in their town halls. They were talking about culture in every area meeting. So it wasn't all about metrics and performances. It was about our people and how our people actually make the difference. And yeah, it was just inclusion in everyday practices. And then, the cherry on the top was the policies and the benefits. And like Zahara mentioned, for Accenture, we have most of those available at Walmart too. And just a simple joy of being able to enroll my same-sex partner into my insurance policy, being able to nominate her as a beneficiary. We've actually used my insurance for one of the small surgeries that my partner underwent. And that just gives you another level of security, right, on an everyday basis. And it makes you feel included because now you're not different, right? So allyship has played I think, a huge role in somebody like my life. And I feel like if you do this right, it really has the potential to create a wave of change. And yeah, it just took simple things like being able to talk to coworkers without being judged, having conversations about your partner and what do you do, and know that, I'm not kind of thinking of a traditional marriage, and no, I don't have kids. And all of those conversations like really changed, right? So I feel like, allies can play a huge role. And there are some things that you can obviously do. We can talk about it either in terms of what the society can do at large and what organizations can do, right? And both the actions are going to look very different. So when you talk about a society, it really starts at home, right? It starts with me correcting my own parents, my own siblings. And if you know better, you can tell them better. And if you don't know better, admit that you don't know better and you learn together. Or you learn from somebody who already knows a lot about this. And there's no shame in really unlearning and relearning. And now, obviously, I mean, if the mainstream cinema is also doing a lot better. If you look at the OTT platforms, I haven't seen a single series in the last 30 to 60 days that hasn't had a queer character, right? So things are getting better. But when you talk about organizations, again, like we are currently doing a series about Mythbusters, where we are talking about, yes, there are stereotypes, but how do you kind of go beyond and learn about them? There's everyday inclusion series that is focusing on educating on topics like pronouns, right? What does it look like to learn about the entire spectrum of the community, LGBTQIA+, right? We are the alphabet mafia, but really what does it take to kind of learn about each of these, and what does that mean? And for example, when I use pronouns in my email signatures, I also make sure that there's a link that says, why are these pronouns here, right? And it goes externally as well. So you can actually click on it and understand why are these here in the first place, right? So yeah, I mean, for me, I'm all about allyship, and I feel like all of us, right? If we get together, I mean, imagine the sort of change that if the community is coming together, organizations coming together, top them up with the allyship and the allies coming together, just imagine what that world is going to look like, right?
Devin, I would like to add to what Rupu said just now. I'm also very happy seeing more easy conversations, storytellings. You spoke about home conversations. However, in context of what impressions these conversations leave, I'm coming to the impact. Most of the time, the definition starts from sex preferences, not the people preferences, not the human being preferences. I think we should look at this as a journey. The woman journey took 25 years in India and 100 years in the rest of the world. Doc knows about it so better than any of us. So I think we need to be ready to be very broad-based and slowly keep on shifting the narrative of our conversations, or the stories, or the cinema, or the theater, by identifying through a sexual preference to a normal person, and you may not even know at the end of the story that the person was having a different orientation.
Just want to add to what Rajesh sir said, right? What we did maybe 4 or 5 decades ago with the whole woman movement, we cannot do now. I remember back then we told women, here's how do you act like men. If you really want to be a leader, you have to wear the pants and show up and stop being emotional. We can't be doing that again. So let's learn from those past mistakes, right? Mistakes which took us so many decades to get ahead in women empowerment. We're still on that journey. I think the other thing that I'll just talk about quickly in terms of allies, right? I think if you think about, right, us as minorities, right? We are a few of us. When we mix up with the allies, our voices get amplified. We get more power, we get more courage, and we get more support. At Accenture, we did a research, and it is called Getting to Better Survey, and we did a research, and 71% of our, marginalized communities, whether it was women, PWDs, Pride, 71% felt that having an ally made their work life easier. Another survey revealed that 40% reduction in suicide can happen among youth transgender people if they have one adult ally. So while like Ruku said, right, allyship is not about lanyards, it's not about waving the pride flag, it's about learning, it's about acting, it's about doing. Please do not undermine the lanyard. The lanyard starts the question. If I see Ram with, his, what is that called, suspenders in a very beautiful pride colors, I want to ask Ram, what are those colors? That's important as well. So while I know a lot of people feel that that's not important, that is not it, but that definitely starts a conversation. It's a great visual reinforcement. So let those conversations happen. We have to get comfortable with the uncomfortables. I'm sorry, point you out.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Ram, this is a great time to bring you in. So, we've spent a lot of this conversation talking about the various challenges, the roles that leaders, allies can play. And of course, ultimately, the crux of everything is communication aspect. So what would you say in your experience is really some of the to sum up the biggest hurdles that organizations are facing when it comes to DE&I, and what role can not only the leaders do, but governments and policymakers in helping to ease the transition to complete inclusiveness?
Thanks. A lot of points. First of all, thanks, Zahara, for the suspender. You can buy it at Rainbow Bazaar, which is India's e-commerce portal by LGBT businesses, right? So We really wanted to make allyship an everyday thing. And supplier diversity is one big way for companies to really engage with LGBT-owned businesses. I heard all of it. I feel a little impatient here because I don't think we have the luxury of time. And I agree with Zahara, like going back and saying, women, be like men if you want to get fit in. I don't think that's going to work. We have to let people be authentic because there's a cost people pay when they're not authentic. There's an Accenture report says that 86% of LGBT plus people still feel unaccepted in the workplace. And we did a massive campaign bringing out stories of discrimination called Fix the Glitch. It's on the website, which is stories of real discrimination from people in India at workplaces. And while we can, and I'm again, congratulations Accenture for being an Ivy Gold employer for 3 years in a row, and also for winning ERG of the year last year. But if you look at the number of companies, the participation in Ivy is 105 companies. Look at the number of companies that operate in India. So there's a small fraction of companies that are actively working on LGBT inclusion, which is not acceptable today. We really need the SBIs and the IRCTs to look at LGBT inclusion, then only will bring about an India-wide change. I honestly don't want to rely a lot on government. I think less governance is better and more of self-learning evolved societies work better when we don't necessarily just follow a bunch of compliances to get done. I think inclusion is common sense. Inclusion is realizing that not everyone in the world is like me. People have different journeys, different sexualities, different real lived experiences. And how can we make a workplace where we just giving basic dignity to each other, that irrespective of your sexuality, gender, anything else, if you have the skill set and the merit, we'll support you to build a fabulous career. And we really will cheer you so that you can become your productive best, and in that process help the organization become the productive best. This is what DNI is about, right? So this is not a charity that this is a good to do program and leadership should talk about. It should be a part of everyday culture. And if you don't know how to do it, come will help you understand entire thing, holistic LGBT inclusion. But I think it's a little too late to say like, hey, this is a nice thing to do and companies should do it. But yes, government does have a huge impact. I think just sometimes we forget that how little progress we have made in the country. Only in 2018 was homosexuality decriminalized. Only in 2014 was transgender recognized as the third legal gender. And the Trans Act came in only 2019. But it still has a lot of room when it talks about actual non-discrimination in the workplace of LGBT people. There's no law that protects people. You have housing discrimination. Today, trans people go and seek housing. They're willing to pay the rent, but no one's giving them a house. How do you find a job and move to a city to work because you can't find accommodation? So these are real problems the community is facing. And I think there is real need for everyone to come together to accelerate the pace of change. From a government perspective, obviously, there's a marriage equality case with the Supreme Court. We're hoping that it goes in the right direction. And it just basically make it easier for every Indian to be included and treated with dignity. That's the ask.
Now, I just want to add, right? I just want to bring something that Ram said and bring something that Ruku said, right? So Ram is saying that, yes, the government will do their bit, but we need to really move fast. And so here are what organizations can do. But like Ruku said, right, it's the society that needs to pace up the change as well, which is why, right, can we, each one of us, take the active conversation into our RWAs to say, why does it say that you will not let these people live in the society? Can we start doing that small bit? And, you know, we don't have to change the whole world together, maybe one step at a time, but just take those steps, right? Just get going with those steps. With that, I just want to add the fact that we are really, really fortunate at Accenture to have 119,000 plus allies globally, and 90% of our leaders have volunteered to be Pride allies. So, you know, we're no longer small, we're no longer marginalized. We're like a massive population here at Accenture.
I know because my brother-in-law is an MD at Accenture. And I know that he takes a lot of conversations that I have with him and then sells it to other consultants. Of course, that's again a joke. I just wanted to add, Zara, to your point and Ram's point. When we talk about DNI being a part of the DNA of the companies, we have to also basically see what the company can back up. And in terms, why I'm bringing this point up is that because we've started a journey massively with working with people with disabilities, working with acid attack survivors, working with people who have various neurodivergent sort of issues. And we're working in a very much larger space. That's why we're talking about, building an inclusive country and world. But I understand that not every company can do it or has the maturity levels to do it. So I would really request that companies now maybe get fears a little bit, but also in the other point on talking about communication for the LGBTQI plus community, I think there is enough and more material available online, on YouTube, on the internet, on the trans community in India. The trans community in India is an ancient community. It's not a community that just happened in the last 10 years. It's an ancient community that has existed for time immemorial. Read up on it. And then we need to really question our own selves, is that if we are a part of this particular society, then why are we not already having these conversations for a community that has existed for time immemorial? Why are we okay with just talking about them on the red lights or talking about them when they come for celebrations, and then not having those conversations for making them equal? So this is on us. Nothing has stopped us from talking to the RWAs. Nothing has stopped us from talking to, and this was also the same conversation I had with companies when 377 existed, and they would come back and say that, oh, we can't do LGBTQI policies because 377 exists, but actually there was no law that stopped companies from having LGBTQI specific centered policies. And so I think that for, in particular, the LGBTQI plus community, there is enough material for us to bring up this conversation and to take it a step further. I think now companies like ours, we need to go and actually see, are we doing enough to have HR not come back to us and tell us that, oh, we want to hire people from the community, however, there is no talent pool existing. So are we then making sure that HR has enough talent pool, and we are companies, all of us here, are companies who can do that? Do we give enough in terms of education and scholarships? Are we going to the universities and saying, hey, here is a particular scholarship, here is a particular company that does this? I've done it with our hospitality school. We have a scholarship that is the Adityananda Scholarship, which focuses on the LGBTQI plus community. In particular, gives a scholarship to trans students who want to have a career to become budding chefs and to become budding hospitality professionals. And I think that I agree with Ram. Let's not wait for other people to do things for us. Do it ourselves. We are in that position of privilege. We are in that, it's like how I keep checking my privilege all the time. I can say all of these things because I'm in this position of privilege, but I think what we do with that privilege is what is really matters the most.
I just thought I would share a few perspectives. And this is from from having been part of the entire women's movement in India to get to a 50-50 gender balance, and what we learned out of that. So when we began, speaking about the fact that women drop off the workplace, that, the workplaces are not inclusive. Even within women, the intersectionality that's there is not really recognized. Organizations don't see it. After a point of time, I would say, because we started Avatar in the year 2000, by about 2007, and I have to say that, Accenture was the first organization that actually stepped forward to allow us to audit it, with regard to flexibility being an enabler for women. And so the passion that Accenture has had for this goes long back, and I have greatest regard for all of you, Zahara. So when we began, we discovered something very fundamental. We found that when you have to drive inclusion, it's actually quite boring. It's not always just about programmatic stuff. that you keep doing. It is about saying the same things again and again and again till it really percolates into everyone. And then after a point of time, you don't need to say it anymore. But till then, we have to do all the boring things. Yes, we are in a hurry. Ram, I completely get what you're saying. I think, what you're talking about, us being in a hurry, wanting to reach those milestones, basically just seeing the change outside that we want. All of us want to see that. But I think, the way we get the conversation going, especially with organizations that are probably not as high above, the maturity curve, like say a Walmart or like an Accenture, is we have to do the simple, basic stuff. And we have to do that consistently again and again, every day, until we really live those values. We have to do stuff like, for instance, we have to ask every organization, small, large, medium, doesn't matter, to institute a DEI council. Determine that, they have to have regular workshops, regular sensitization programs around what, pride means, what the LGBTQ community really wants. What do, for instance, single women want? The outliers, programs which are usually not so easy for organizations to implement, but which nevertheless reflect the society around. So they have to be part of the conversation within the organization. You spoke about, the survey that was conducted in Accenture, Zahara. I think it's very, very important for companies to conduct those, periodic surveys to gather feedback, who's feeling included, who's feeling excluded, that sort of a thing. Do we train our managers to really be sensitive? Are they being culturally inclusive? Do they realize, what is there outside? The person sitting next to you, in the chair next to you, could be going through something and you could be completely oblivious to that. Do we create enough opportunities for employees to speak up? And do we provide flexible working? See, when the pandemic hit, we had such a large number of members within, Avatars, myavatar.com, which is the only inclusivity portal in this country. We had so many members from the LGBTQ community who told us, you know what, we are loving this flexibility. We are loving the fact that we are working from home. I don't need to explain myself to anyone. I'm doing my work. I'm, feeling very happy. But the fact is that today, they're all coming back into the workplace. So what changed during those years? And what needs to, again, for instance, be rediscovered or probably reinvented? What kind of career development opportunities are we really giving to, people from underrepresented talent pools? And, you beautifully spoke about it, Ruku, about the policies. And the fact that, equity-led enablers are really how we walk the talk. So I think, I completely get the fact that we must do more. We must do it in a hurry. There is a burning platform. And we need to, take that attitude towards change. I think we also need to consistently do the boring stuff. I've always found that the boring stuff really yields results because it means that you're so serious about it. It's like dal chawal. It's like your basic tair sadam at home. And you're eating that, but that is foundational. That's fundamental. And you're doing that again and again, and people get it. So I just wanted to emphasize because, this is what we have seen really yielding results. Back to you.
Just to add this,
Thank you.
one
Yes,
line
please.
to, and very exciting what you're saying. I completely agree with you. We don't have time, but we also cannot be depending on the government. At the same time, we cannot be oblivious of the vehicles which are around us, which may, ESG is talk of the town. This year, 1,000 companies have to file their ESG sustainability report to SEBI. So from 100 to 1,000 reports, and the moment you start talking about inclusion in your S, inclusion policy in your governance, your score shoots up. So maybe these companies are not committed completely for the cause, but at least the trigger would happen. And once that vehicles start getting used for, I'm doing better, I'm good, and journey it gets accelerated. So it's not only government, there are lots of other vehicles which somehow, I would love to see Keshav, as you said, while they are FICCI and CII, I would love to see a innovation body, people who constantly keep on coming from the point of view of how can we create newer opportunities, learning school, as you spoke about, accelerated programs for people to shift careers. So that vehicle we should not lose, while we know that government is not going to be as fast.
Thank you, Rajesh. Absolutely. So to your point and to Keshav's point about the steps that organizations can actually take tangibly, so you mitigate any of the so-called barriers to creating an inclusive environment is really key. And as we wrap up this conversation, I'd love to ask each of you just for one sort of key takeaway on roles and steps that an organization can take to ensure accountability for their own diversity, equity, and inclusion plans. Just one key takeaway that we can maybe slowly wrap up this conversation with. Ruku, maybe we can start with you.
In my opinion, I think the fact that every organization could possibly have a DEI office to start with that is led by obviously the executive leadership. Having an ARG, ENG, and it goes by different names in different organizations is extremely important, but also with a set of KPIs. So obviously, because that's a group of passionate people coming together to make a change from bottom up. That is also absolutely key, because that experiences the feedbacks that you need to hear for your policy making. Also, imagine the experience of a person from the community is not limited to when they come into the company. It's a holistic experience. So even having methodologies to gauge their experience after they've come into the organization, let's say do a survey after 1 year of being here, even from a performance management perspective. The ARG sometimes fuel some of these ideas and kind of take it to the leadership, right? So I believe the KPIs for the ARG and the existence of the ARG, along with the DEI office, and reporting on these metrics regularly is also key. So for example, in Walmart, we have a quarterly business review where the ARGs are also supposed to go and present what they did in the quarter. So it's not just the business talking about, I got you this much profit, I got you this much sales. It's about me going in that QBR and, telling my leadership, okay, that, we've been able to increase our ally base. We've made these changes in policy. We're looking at inclusive communication when it comes to the dress code policy and actually all our policies, right? So I feel like these 2-3 things should probably, add a lot of value and should be relatively simple to start with at least.
Ram, maybe you, one key takeaway for steps of accountability that organizations can take.
Since DI is a business imperative, treat it like any other business targets that you have, right? And it has to be a holistic thing. It can't be just celebrating Pride Month. So be it talent engagement, internship, fellowship, lateral hiring, reach out to LGBT talent, plug LGBT entrepreneurs in your supply diversity program, have continuous sensitization, awareness, trainings, education within the organization. Look at representation from junior staff all the way to board level. When we talk about sensitization education, don't stop with employees and people manager, but also go to support staff and your vendors. So see, it is about everything the company does. How do we look at it with the lens of LGBT plus inclusion and tweak where need be? You have to have a comprehensive, holistic, measurable way that you're able to carry your progress forward and see where the gaps are, because this is just another aspect of the way we work as a company. And how do we measure that in a way that really derives value, gives you insights, and helps you go back and course correct and take accountability, please. Let this not be a DNI team's job. Let this be everybody's job, because without accountability, there's no.
Very inspiring. Rajesh?
So I'll take an example from financial industry. We have a risk appetite statement. I would like to have an inclusion appetite statement from large corporates. And we should be very clear about that. And that statement will force us to think about the barriers, the policies which will remove these barriers, how do we prepare people. So that inclusion appetite is a word coming to my mind. So I don't know whether it's possible to have that statement, but something that you can put in your annual report, that my appetite for inclusion is 70%. And then you start figuring what's the gap that you have.
Everything that Ram said, but I want to just maybe add 2 points, taking in continuation of what we've just discussed here. Sorry if I'm not answering your question, Divina, but just, I had this one sort of epiphany, but it's not an epiphany, it's more like a comment that I want to make. When we do DEI journeys in companies, I think we need to make sure that the company does not have this sort of savior complex, because it's very easy to get into that, especially when you go into bringing up conversations and then after that doing affirmative action. So let's not save any any member. We're not saving anybody. The community can save itself. We need to basically be having an equitable platform. I think that's the key. If, let's say, the DEI team and their financial performance and their business cases is all in the DEI's hand, then please have the DEI head sit on your board of directors. Please make sure that the HR head is sitting on the board of directors and actually presenting in every board meeting exactly what we're doing. And we'll take a cue from what Rajesh sir just said about ESG. So as you do ESG, and since this conversation is particular to the LGBTQI+ community, in that ESG report that you're putting out to the board of directors or to any potential investors and to any sort of partnership that you're doing at the top level, bring that report in and say, hey, we do this. We have these policies. In particular, we have for the LGBTQI+ community, and make that as a part of your everyday. That's how it will be at our policy level and at a decision-making level. And then on a daily basis, to have the daily conversations, the best way to do that is actually have team members that are representatives of some of these intersectionality communities. If, let's say, you're not being able to find the team members, then do these conversations not just by an HR head or a training head, but do these conversations with NGOs. And there are many NGOs out there and non-for-profit organizations who can come and have conversations with the community. Don't relegate it to just our conversation on, just queerness, or a lot of companies do this thing on having HIV awareness and they think that they've covered the gay community. That's wrong. Bring in people that are actually who are representing shelters, transgender shelters that are across. By the way, it's a Government of India program that are, these gharanas are across India. Bring them in. Let them have those conversations. Let them tell your team members how important it is to have a gender identifying toilet. How important it is for somebody to not be able to sit in a workspace for 8 hours and not be able to go to a toilet because they cannot have that gender affirmating, or you don't have those policies. So I think this conversation can happen, yes, but it should happen with people that are actually walking a bit in their shoes. Now, I understand we cannot walk in everybody's shoes. We can't. But what we can do is we can at least try. And we can be just, we can at least empathize. We can try. The only way we'll do it is by bringing people who are doing ground level work into the organization. And I have to give a shout out to Accenture also. I'm hoping that Accenture does a lot more data collection on the queer community in India. We desperately need it, as it came out in the same-sex marriage petitions that are going on in the Supreme Court. We need a lot more data that is centric to the LGBTQI+ community in India. We need data that supports that inclusion journey in LGBTQI+ community in India is good for business.
Thank you, Keshav, for that very heartfelt and very inspiring wrap up. Dr. Sandhya, let's get you in on this as we slowly come to a close, of a key takeaway you would recommend for organizations to look at when it comes to accountability.
I would say don't travel the inclusion path alone. I would say, even if it means that you're looking at a competitive differential in terms of culture, by having your own unique policies or programs, or surveys for the community, for the LGBTQ community, I would say join hands with other organizations, compare strategies. I would even say actually engage the expert services of consulting firms like Pride Circle. I think it's very important because that can guide you, in every step of your inclusion journey. Why? Because even today, inclusion of every kind, and more specifically that of LGBTQ inclusion, is a difficult concept to make everyone become aware. It is fuzzy. and it's vague, and that needs to be communicated again and again. And who better than the experts to actually help you devise how you can communicate, to your audience, how you can ensure that your leaders really see the value of it. All of it, I think it's very important to build a lot of partnerships in this journey, whether it is with other like-minded organizations, or if it is taking an expert company, an expert DI consulting firm along the way. Any kind of inclusion journey is like climbing Mount Everest summit. It's a very hard and difficult trek. It's wearing, it involves sustaining on very limited options, puffing and panting your way through very uneventful pathways, sometimes years. But then when you're there at the top, the view is absolutely worth it, not just for us within the organization, but I think the kind of view that you can see, the kind of vision, and I see that every day, every morning I wake up with that 50-50 gender balance in front of my eyes, and I say, this is what I'm working towards. And even if it's a tough day, difficult day, I think that's how we motivate ourselves. So I would say this path of inclusion is meant for many people to travel together. So let's make sure that it's not a lonely journey.
Beautiful. Thank you. And finally, of course, Zahara, would love to have you encapsulate a key takeaway for organizations to look at, as well as the key enabler that the community can face and thrive from when it comes to succeeding in excellence in their career path.
And I must confess, I've been a statistician a part of my life, and so I will keep throwing data at you. And I'm a learning and development profession, so I'm extremely biased to development, right? So having said that, let me start with one data bit, right? 31% people will reveal, only 31% people will ever find comfort to reveal their true identities at workplace, which means organizations need to get comfortable with an invisible audience. You are not going to be able to be inclusive only when you choose to be inclusive, because you always are surrounded by an invisible audience. So you have to be inclusive all the time and get comfortable with that. That's number one. Stories matter. Stories drive change. And stories, and much to what Keshav said, right? Stories bring to life what you cannot experience. I cannot know what being a transgender person feels like. I cannot. But when you tell me a story, and when that person narrates their story and talks to me about the challenges of just walking into a cab that's driving them to work, I understand that, right? So make a lot of stories a part of your canvas. At Accenture, we have something called Hues of Rainbow, and I've had some of my most eye-opening stories there. A parent's intersectionality made me realize how much opportunities I have as a queer parent. And so, stories matter. Have those uncomfortable conversations, right? We all focus on recruitment. We all focus on bringing in the diversity numbers. Yes, I met that agenda. I hired the people. You can't stop at that, right? Like Keshav said, right? You're not doing something that is good to do. You're doing something that's going to boost your innovation, that's going to give you better product lines, that's going to boost your productivity. And so if you're doing that, after you've got the numbers in the diverse populations into your firm, you require to then give them career paths. Again, I've had the privilege of bringing a career developing partner over at Accenture, and we're doing our first batch of leading people to becoming change leaders from our Pride community. So I think don't stop at recruitment, do the next steps. And allyship begins with all, and allyship begins with A, and so does action. So it's just got to be action oriented.
Wow. Thank you for that, Zahara. Really, really beautiful summary. So well, on that note, this is a vast topic. We can very much continue in great depth. But on that note, I would really, on behalf of Economic Times and Accenture, like to thank all of you for all your insights, all your input, and all your passion that's really come through in every single point that every one of you has driven through this conversation. So big thank you. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you. It's really been inspiring to have this dialogue on understanding the importance of creating an inclusive culture, diversifying the workforce, and driving change. Until next time, many thanks for watching.